Good morning everyone, welcome back to Gillian at Mystic Healing Therapies. So today this is video 7 and we're on Valentine's Day, 14th of February 2022. I'm sending everyone lots of heartfelt love today, so we're on the love vibration, the golden or pink heart-centered love, and I also feel inclined to send the love from Mother Mary, the Archangel Mary as well. Alright, so what we're going to talk about today, going on the love vibration, is quite a difficult subject. So what I'm going to talk about is death today. Death and dying and how we see that in our world. So many of you might know I've been a psychotherapist for over 20 years, so I've helped many people through the harrowing and distressing grieving process that we experience when we lose a loved one. So I'm going to start by saying I am very much in touch with the grief, the loss, the heart-wrenching sadness, and it's undescribable sometimes, that feeling of loss when we lose a loved one. So I'm starting this video by acknowledging that emptiness that people feel when they lose a loved one. But what I'm also going to do is talk about how we look at death in our society in England in 2022. How are we viewing death? So I'm going to start with that really. So quite often in our culture, my belief is, in my culture as a white woman living in these times, is that we don't really deal with death very well. You know, it's a taboo subject that we're not encouraged to talk about. You know, if we have to renew our life insurance or write a will, there's always, in lots of instances, a very uncomfortable feeling because it's almost like we don't talk about death. And in some ways I think that's quite a shame, because to me death is a cycle of life. So there's a time to live, there's a time to die, and there's a place in between. But it's almost like our culture denies this fact, so we're trying to cling on to life at every aspect of life. We're desperate to cling to it in the fear of death. You know, there's an awful lot of fear around death. So let's talk about life paths then, and what we come to do. So I've mentioned on previous videos that, you know, we all before we incarnate into this life, we'll have a life path set out. So let's say we're going, just for example, I'm using the idea of travelling from Derby to London. So we're going to start our life in Derby and we're finishing it in London. So they're two fixed points. So we've got sort of the birth point, let's say it's Derby, and we've got the death point, which is London. But how we transverse that path from Derby to London, from our birth to our death, is entirely up to us and in free will. But my personal view is we have this time to live, time to be born, and time to die, and that is pretty much set in stone. Now this can become very difficult for a lot of people to understand or believe, especially if we lose a loved one very young. You know, that is for many people going through the grieving period, the worst thing they could ever do is lose a child or lose somebody when they're very young. It's just heart-wrenching and terrible for them, and it's really natural to go through a grieving process. Normal and natural part of being human. But what I can see from this sort of society we live in is that we aren't very well equipped. You know, if we've got no knowledge of this sort of fixed birth point and fixed death point, then it makes the whole grieving process complicated, because we can start thinking, this isn't fair, they shouldn't have died then, they died too young, etc, etc. And while of course that is very true if you view it from a three-dimensional space, you know, it's why would a young person want to pass over into spirit? That's from a three-dimensional space. But if we can rise above that and see that sometimes these souls incarnate with the idea that, okay, I only need to live 7 years on this life on the earth, and then I'm going to take my transition back into the spirit world. If we view it like that, it makes it a lot easier in some ways. I know that you know, losing a young person's never easy, or losing anyone's never easy, but if we kind of understand the life path and the choices these souls make before they come into the world, then it makes the whole process just that little bit easier when we're dealing with the grieving process. So what you've got to remember is when we incarnate with a life path and a life purpose, everybody involved in that will have chosen to experience the loss of that person. So let's just say, just for the want of an example, let's say somebody decides that they want 21 years on earth, and then they're going to exit because they'll have learnt everything in this life path on the 21 years. The parents of that person, the siblings, the grandparents, the friends, they'll have all be part of this, and they'll all realise that they need to learn what it's like to lose somebody at that age and that period of their life. And this is really, really, really hard to take, you know. We've had personal discussions with friends, family, and it's really a tough thing to kind of understand that, you know, we have a time to live and we have a time to die, and if that time's a premature time or seemingly premature, then it's even harder. But if we have this insight of life paths and viewing it from a 5-dimensional space, it becomes a little easier to deal with. So lots of cultures sort of embrace life and death as part of the life cycle, and they have a much healthier way of viewing passing over to spirit. So they'll celebrate the life, they'll of course miss and mourn the physicality of the loved one, but they'll view it that loved one's just gone to a temporary place. So if, let's say for example, you have a relative that moves to Australia, just say, so you say your goodbyes and then you don't see them for probably 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, whatever, because that's just how it's gone. But you're not mourning the loss of them, because even though you miss the physicalness of them and the connection, you know they're still there. Well, if you view life and death like that the soul lives on. Remember, the soul energy will live on no matter what. Energy can't be destroyed, it just changes form. So when we lose loved ones, if we kind of see it as though they've moved to Australia, for example, we can't see them, we can't be with them all the time, but we know they're still there. It makes the grieving process a lot easier. So when I was 21, I lost my grandfather, who was only 61, and it was a shock because he just passed away. He sat down under a tree and had a heart attack. I mean, personally, I think that's a beautiful way to go. You know, he was out for the day with his family and the dogs who he loved, and he sat down under a tree and that was it. He passed away. Of course, it was shocking. I missed him. It was sad, but I didn't actually feel that heart-wrenching terribleness because I'm mediumistic, I could talk to him. So, you know, when it was permitted, he was allowed to come and kind of tell me he was all right. So even to this day, 30 years on, I still don't think of him as gone. I just think of him as he's moved to Australia, because I know that when I pass to spirit, I'll see him again if I want to, or the essence of him still lives on. So it just makes the whole process a lot easier. So yes, another thing is, you know, sometimes we can't bear the idea of our 90-year-old grandparent passing to spirit, and we feel shocked and horrified and angry, but actually that's the cycle of life, you know. That person's probably ready to pass on, they're probably ready to have a new body, if you believe in reincarnation, which I certainly do. For some people it's actually a relief to pass over to spirit, because in the spirit world we don't feel pain. You know, if you've got a body that's crumbling and not functioning, it can feel quite a release to leave the body and be in spirit world. And that's certainly the experience of a lot of people that have had near-death experiences. You know, they feel this euphoric feeling of being in the spirit world. So I just wanted to share my thoughts on death and dying. You know, I'm not saying that it's not normal and natural to feel that utter sense of loss, because of course it is. You're missing the physical person, and of course you're going to feel sad and lost. But if 20 years on you're still at that point, then it's a complicated reaction. And if you kind of move your perception a little and understand life and death and the cycle of life a little more, it might just ease the pain. So I just wanted to share that with you today. Like I say, difficult subject, I know, and it can be really quite triggering. If you watch this video and you're triggered and you want some support, just email me. It's on the channel. My contact details are on the channel if you subscribe to my channel. You don't have to pay to subscribe, by the way. You just literally press the red thumbs up button. And so I'll leave that with you. And like I say, lots of love to all of you, and I'll speak to you soon. Thanks for listening. Bye.